Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for ACT's June webinar. We're going to get started here in just a few moments, so hang tight. Thank you. And good afternoon again. Thank you all for waiting. We're going to get started here in just one more minute and get started here just after the 2 o'clock hour. Thank you. Okay, hello. My name is Casey Murphy, and I am ACT's Events and Programs Manager. Welcome to our June webinar. I want to first thank all of you today for joining us for When Disaster Strikes, Integrating TDM into Emergency Preparedness. Our presenters this afternoon will be Lisa Jemison is the Director and Company and University Engagement at the Research Triangle Park, and Dezra Nauls, Commuter Service Program Manager at the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County. Before we hear from our presenters this afternoon, I wanted to quickly take care of a few housekeeping items for you. First, just wanted to make you all aware that all attendees are on mute during the webinar. If you have a question or have a problem hearing us, please hit the question mark sign to the left of your name and type in your question. And I will do my best to answer everything as the webinar gets going. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to type in your question in the question mark section as we go along, and I'll make sure that we get all your questions answered at the end. Finally, I know this is a hot question for everyone. This session is being recorded, and I will have the recording up on the ACT website within 24 hours after the presentation ends. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to David Strauss, ACT Executive Director, to give an update on what ACT has going on right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. As the premier transportation demand management organization in the United States, ACT strives to build a strong community of professionals working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within the communities that they serve. TDM is the overarching umbrella that brings together transportation policy, planning, and programs that can address challenges from commuting to work, or in the case of today's theme, emergency preparedness. It's great to see so many people joining us today on today's call, really representing a wide range of sectors, private employers, city, state agencies, TMAs, regional rideshare programs, and others. Quickly, just to open up a poll, curious to know how many people are watching today with you in your location. If you can just take a moment to let us know. Oh, all right, never mind. We're not going to do that poll. We will move on. As the leading advocate for TDM, ACT strives to get the most out of our transportation system while improving the lives of commuters, increasing the livability of communities, and supporting the economic growth of businesses. And I wanted to really take one quick moment to just update folks on an issue that we've been really paying attention to over the last few months, and that's a quick update on ACT's response to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and let everyone know that last week ACT did submit a letter to the U.S. Treasury requesting guidance on a range of scenarios facing exempt organizations, as well requested a delay in enforcement until guidance is completed, and an exemption for organizations and communities requiring transit benefits be provided through a local ordinance. And we'll be following up with Treasury and updating all of our members on the actions that are being taken from them as we receive word. Legislation has been submitted by Rep. Conaway of Texas to repeal the inclusion of the transit benefit from unrelated business income, and we encourage all members to voice their support for this bill to the local members of Congress. You can get information on it from our website, actweb.org. If you're already a member of ACT, you know about the many benefits that we have as an organization. But I wanted to just provide a couple updates on upcoming events if you are not a member or if you are a member. Our international conference is July 29th to August 1st in Anaheim, California. The event promises to be one of our largest in many years, bringing over 500 TDM professionals from around the United States, Canada, and a few other countries around the world for 4 days of learning and networking. As well, our TDM forum, which will be opening up soon for registration, is November 13th to 14th in Nashville, Tennessee. So I hope to see many of you at those upcoming events. Today's webinar, When Disaster Strikes, Integrating TDM into Emergency Preparedness. This webinar will demonstrate how to put yourself back in the driver's seat of your relationship, client relationships, and use data to know what your customer wants before they even know you exist. In recent years, actually, I'm reading wrong notes. We've seen an increase in intense weather events and natural disasters, bringing entire regions to a standstill. It is now imperative that all communities and organizations have emergency response plans that not only incorporate how you will safely evacuate your residents and employees, but also how you will get them back to work after the event. TDM should play a key role in these efforts, and TDM professionals should be prepared to lead their development. Today we have two great presenters that are preparing for future emergencies, and will share the challenges and missed opportunities they've faced while working through a disaster, and what a new plan should look like moving forward. Our first speaker is Lisa Jemison, Director of Company and University Engagement at the Research Triangle Park. In her role, she leads key aspects of communications and development initiatives for the park's 250 companies, which are situated on 7,000 acres in Wake and Durham counties and house 50,000 full-time science and technology employees. She manages the RTP Owners and Tenants Association, the membership entity that guides company decisions related to planning, development, infrastructure, and investments in the park. Currently, she oversees a 12-month initiative with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security that is helping companies prepare and test their campus emergency response and evacuation plans. The initiative will ensure that neighboring campus plans point to each other in the event of multi-campus emergencies or evacuations. Lisa has a BS and MS degrees in life sciences from University of Connecticut and has worked in management level roles in economic development, nonprofits for nearly 2 decades. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Jemison.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today and to talk about a really exciting and timely project that I have the opportunity to work on. It's definitely not something that I saw coming my way, which I wonder is a similar seat that many of you may find yourselves in, but it's here now, and I've been really grateful to be able to weave TDM into something that is identified as a really big value and a really big need for our companies, that being coordinated emergency management, because it allows me to be able to bring in TDM to let them see it in a new light, in a way that's pressing and important and valued, whereas I'm sure I'm in good company when I say sometimes TDM isn't always, and RTP is often finding itself in that boat because we have a lot of free parking. So quick up, I'll start just sharing about who we are. Our Research Triangle Park. We are one of the oldest and one of the most renowned research parks in the world. Our job is to create jobs for the state of North Carolina. We have 3 founding universities, that being UNC Chapel Hill, Duke University, and North Carolina State University, and they create a talent pipeline in the Research Triangle. Geographically, we form a triangle on a map. Those universities form the 3 points of the triangle, and we have a talent pipeline that feeds right into our companies. We have 50,000 employees, and actually as of this morning, we have 283 companies in Research Triangle Park. And we're known around the country and certainly around the world as the reason for the region and Silicon Valley East. So North Carolina, prior to the presence of Research Triangle Park, was very much a tobacco, farming, furniture economy, but with its 3 founding universities, and I would also add North Carolina Central University to that. This is geographically, that's the closest university to us, but it wasn't part of the big 3 initially, but we just brought them onto our board, so I'll say the big 4 now. These universities produced a tremendous amount of knowledge workers that were then leaving the country, or leaving the state, I'm sorry. And so RTP was created as a way to keep those students here and to keep their talents here. And as a result, we've created what has become known as Silicon Valley East, this very big technological part of the country where we have every major sector of the American economy here, ranging from, we have heavy military presence in North Carolina and certainly here in the Triangle, but we also have healthcare, we have agriculture, we have pharmaceuticals, we have kind of a little bit of everything. So as it turns out, the challenges for TDM and emergency management planning are kind of the same. There's a lot of similarities, and I didn't go into this project really thinking about that, but I see it now. Our population, as I said, we have 50,000 employees in the park, and we have 280 companies, and we're rapidly growing. Geographically, we are in 2 different counties, but so that leaves us a little bit of trouble in that I think there were historical reasons why we were in 2 different counties, but the practicality of that is that we are not in a municipality, and so we actually rely on regional service versus our own service for transportation, and we only have 7 major roads. So what that means is that we're a little difficult to serve in the first place, and nobody kind of owns us. We have to rely on our regional partners, and they're wonderful, and they do a lot of work for us. But we're kind of in a position of being reliant on versus having our own stuff the way a typical municipality would have. We have a very diverse portfolio, which is wonderful for creating jobs for our state, but we have 1-person startups all the way to 6,000-person campuses, which makes for, again, a geographically diverse place, which can find itself difficult to serve with buses, and certainly for emergency planning, as I'm sure you can imagine, the types of resources that a 6,000-plus person campus is going to have to put behind emergency planning is going to be very different than a 1-person startup that is very head down, creating the next new molecule that will, deliver, X solution in cancer fighting disease, or something like that. So it's just very, very diverse. We're both proud of that, but it's not without its challenges. And then historically, as I said, we are not a municipality. We have 3 universities that form a triangle on a map. We're right in the middle of that. So we're kind of everywhere and nowhere. We're between these 3 municipalities, but we're not any of those municipalities. We're in 2 different counties. We're kind of the isolated research park, very large, but isolated research park behind the trees. And so what that means is that historically there's kind of been this perception that we are an isolated island, and that hasn't been wrong. Because we have been. Our region has only really started to pick up and grow at the pace that it's at just in the last decade or so. Densification is imminent. We are on the top 1 or 2 of every list out there about the fastest regions growth rates nationwide. We're 1, 2, or maybe 3. We're growing rapidly, and yet historically in our own backyard, there's still sort of this, oh, that's in the park. It's kind of like nowhere, but we're becoming somewhere really quickly. And so I just wanted to show you a little bit about these, what these campuses look like. This is the EPA campus in RTP, just to give you a sense for the size of our individual campuses. So we're 7,000 acres as a full park, but our campuses, this is pretty normal for our large campuses. And then this next slide is IBM's campus in RTP. And what you kind of can't see from this picture is the driveway length for IBM and EPA. In some places, it's half a mile or more. So we're really hard to serve in terms of bus service. We don't make that easy for our regional partners, just the way that we are sprawled out to provide space for these campuses to do private research behind the trees. We intentionally created this very suburban, hidden sort of campus, but to serve with buses or trains, for that matter, is really difficult. And in addition to that, for emergency planning, we've created these sort of isolated places that people need to be able to get in and out of quickly in an emergency. So here's a condensed timeline for this emergency management project, and I'm going to lead you in the direction of what all this has to do with TDM. So in August of 2017, we got a new CEO, and that CEO came in and sort of asked, hey, where's the emergency management plan for the park? And quite honestly, I didn't really have a great answer to that question. Oh, my bullets just got messed up. Sorry about that. Okay. I knew I was missing something. So security at RTP is a security directors network that we have in the park. It is a network that's existed since the late 1990s. And basically the security directors on all of our large campuses get together quarterly to kind of talk about security risks in the park. Is there theft? Are there people, vandalizing? It's kind of like a neighborhood watch sort of a thing, and that's existed since the 90s. That's been humming along really nicely in this nice little pace, and they do what they do, and it's my job to oversee that group in addition to a lot of other things. And so fast forward to August of 2017, and our new CEO came in and said, hey, where's the emergency management plan for the park? If we all needed to get out of here at the same time, where's the plan? I didn't really have an answer to that. I said, gosh, I don't know that there is one, which was kind of embarrassing. I've been here for 5 years, but we don't have any of that. And so as I started to dig around, I went to that security group and I said, hey, have you all ever done this before about emergency management for the park? I know you all have it for your own campuses more or less, but do you have it for the park? And I was pointed to a Department of Homeland Security report that had been reported around 2008, which is called an RRAP, a Regional Resiliency Assessment Program, which post 9/11, this was created to try to figure out what's the security risk of RTP, right? We have every aspect of the American economy here. We are in relatively close proximity to the Capitol. Just a few things in the post 9/11 world. Our companies, our security group, asked to have an RRAP written for the park, and I thought that would be a good place to start. So I called Homeland Security because I know a handful of people there that are on our security group. And next thing I know, I'm in a meeting with them talking about the RRAP. And basically, what the RRAP figured out is that from an emergency planning perspective, the needs of the park, communications, coordination, practices, drills, procedures, all of those were identified in that RRAP report, but shame on us as an organization, we didn't really do anything with that. We took the information, we digested it, but we didn't actually facilitate the type of intercompany coordination and certainly the types of practices that are required in order to do a drill of sorts, where if we had to move 50,000 people out on 7 roads from these spread out campuses, how exactly would we do that, especially if we don't have a lot of transportation options? So when I brought that back to our companies, to our security group, and I said, hey, this is what's in this report, they all kind of said, Lisa, these needs haven't changed. It's been 10 years, but these needs kind of haven't changed. And so next thing I find myself in is that DHS, I'll call them DHS, Department of Homeland Security, DHS is sharing with me, because of all the things that I said, our military presence, our proximity to the capital, the American economy pieces, they were like, you know what, Lisa, not only are these pieces still in play that were identified in the RRAP, but the reasons why the RTP area is so important to us as a way of protecting the American economy and the American infrastructure, if anything, you all are more important to us now than you were 10 years ago, because you're just continuing to grow. And as we continue to grow and as we become more successful and as we have better industry and a stronger economy here, our impact on the American economy is stronger, right? So we have a lot of companies that are located here, but they're global companies. And so if somebody wanted to make a statement about the American economy, or certainly hurt the global economy, we're not a bad choice. I don't mean to say that we're on a high level of risk or something like that, but they just spoke very plainly with me. They were like, people who do bad things know what's here, and they know what the impact would be if they chose you. So why don't you start to fill in these gaps? And so really, once our companies heard that, and once they understood that DHS was willing to work with us very closely on that, by December 1st, we had our first meeting with all of our companies, and kind of all of this quickly formed. So from August to December 1st, this thing has sort of grown like a wildfire. And so what the Park-Wide Emergency Planning Project is a partnership of federal, state, and county collaboration to work on human safety, regional, state, and national economy. It is a series of workshops and trainings in the 3 areas listed on the screen, and we facilitate coordination, best practices between neighboring companies. That meaning, if you have an emergency plan, talk to your neighbor, figure out, make sure that their plan aligns with yours, and that we have communication so that if we're releasing people, we are doing that in coordination with each other so that we don't clog all of our roads at the same time. It will inform tax dollar investments, so particularly in terms of the services that we offer here in the park, staff that we're going to need to hire to oversee it all and make it happen. And then in this project, we're going to have a culminating exercise, but it seems that in order to make sure that this process doesn't end up on the shelf like the last RRAP report did, we need to repeat this every 12 to 18 months with our companies to make sure that we're all kind of steady and on pace with each other, especially as new companies come to the park or to the region, that we're not starting over from zero 5 years from now because no one did anything. So I'll blow through this. This is just a quick look at who our planning partners are. So my organization, our Owners and Tenants Association, these security and facilities are 2 kind of professional development networking groups here in the park, and then all of our regional partners. And so where there was alignment, like I said, this spread like a wildfire, and I wasn't really expecting it to happen. I wasn't planning for this, and then suddenly this massive project is on my lap, and everyone is saying it should have been done 10 years ago. So what that has to do with TDM, these are all things that, again, I know all of you know that communications and coordination is central to TDM. And in this case, emergency management had the same needs. Our geographic location and the level of service that we offer in terms of public transit is a vulnerability in an emergency, and it makes for a tricky TDM program. So these are all things that our companies already knew, but now we're looking at it at a different lens. It actually created a level of urgency, and it put a new spin on us addressing the things that we've been talking about for a long time in many of the TDM conversations that we've had. And sort of my aha moment it was a moment of gratitude, quite honestly. It was when I realized that there was alignment between these 2 projects and that each one is going to strengthen the other. Then it suddenly felt like, instead of it being this beast, a burden that was kind of put on my plate that I didn't really know what to do with it, suddenly I was like, wow, this is actually a really great opportunity to take something that I've been pushing uphill for so long with all the free parking that we have in the park. And now I can actually talk with folks in a totally different way, in a totally different audience within our bigger companies about something that really matters. So it's kind of like, I don't like saying killing 2 birds with 1 stone, but feeding 2 birds with 1 seed is how I say it. So it's a way to weave TDM in. So it brought TDM, or it has an opportunity to bring TDM to the forefront of otherwise, siloed partners are thinking. So rather than me just talking about TDM with HR, now I'm talking about TDM with their security officers. It's a totally different conversation, but it could potentially open the doors. It forces us to think about mass evacuation more so than just a hurricane evacuation. So you're going to hear from our next presenter in a moment about a hurricane evacuation, and I don't mean to belittle that at all. But what Homeland Security is most interested in isn't so much the hurricane stuff. I mean, it is. We need to make sure that our companies are able to be successful and keep their businesses rolling. The business continuity piece during a hurricane is essential in order for a company to respond and to be resilient after the fact, after an emergency. But I think what Homeland Security was most looking at was more common weather events in our region, which is ice and snow. If suddenly there's an ice storm that comes through, which happens pretty often, and everyone's getting on the roads at the same time, our emergency management folks locally that respond to the park really want to work with us, and we've already been developing solutions about how our companies communicate with each other so we don't dump 50,000 people on the roads at the same time unknowingly, and then we end up in a situation where people are crashing into each other and then nobody gets home. That creates a mess. And then the second piece is, if there is, God forbid, a coordinated terrorist attack, I hate to say that out loud. I don't want to sound like an alarmist. I have to temper who I use that type of language with. But the reality is that if RTP is all that I said that it is, then people who do that kind of thing know what's here. And we need to be able to know, not freak out about it, not be emotional about it, but let's just go into it with our eyes wide open and know that if we had something where something happened here and we needed to move people quickly, completely unexpectedly, it's not like we can watch a storm come in through on the radar. We have no idea that this is happening or that it's going to happen until it does. What do we do? And what role does public transportation play in that? How can we leverage our partnerships to get people out of here? And I think that, again, we are right in a fly zone, for example, for RDU Airport. Even if it was an accident that involved an airplane or a freight train, which is nearby us too, those are all things that may require us to move people quickly, that may purely be an accident, not necessarily a terrorist event, but may purely be an accident. But our companies need to know, A, who their neighbors are and what their plans are, and B, we need to move people fast, and what do we do? And how can TDM help us? So that really allowed us to use cross-operational approaches when we're talking about TDM now, whereas solely we've just been going through HR. And so it allows me now to use our emergency ride home program and our share the ride NC, which is our ride matching program. I can talk about those things in a totally different way rather than going to the same person at HR who's a little bored with me. Now I can go to the security officer and say, no, this stuff matters, and here's why. These people need to know who they can get a ride with if something happens. And it's a new way to bring employers into the fold who haven't been, as responsive to TDM because we have so much free parking. They get a little tired of me coming to them. And it allows us to engage with our transit provider, Go Triangle, and our Regional Council of Government in a really new and exciting way that really helps everybody. So in that sense, this thing that kind of came out of the sky and landed on my desk that was a little scary at first is actually really, really awesome and really exciting and useful. So here are some questions. I wanted to make this practical for you in terms of, some advice, some lessons learned along the way. We're in some ways just getting started. I hope that we'll be able to have a follow-up conversation about this, perhaps later in the year or sometime next year where I can tell you more of our results. But here's where we are right now. So do your employers incorporate TDM into their emergency planning? I can pretty much promise you the answer to that is probably no. They're not talking to each other. HR is not talking with risk management about this type of thing, or at least that has been my experience. They're each talking about really important things, but not necessarily with each other. Do they talk about TDM from the perspective of the entity, the company, versus the individual employees? So what I mean by that is, if something happens at X company, is the company going to call for help from the public transit agency? So that's one thing that they can do to get people off their site quickly. But also individual employees like emergency ride home and ride matching, are they getting down to that granular level with their folks? Do they explicitly align the two, or are they keeping them siloed? Are they saying that ride matching is important for emergency management as much as it is for air quality and quality of life and, keeping people, off the highways to avoid traffic? And then do they train and practice with their employees? Again, my experience is that they're sending emails to their employees about emergency ride home, but they're not practicing that. When they do a fire drill, when they do an active shooter drill, they're not practicing what happens when you get to your car, or what happens when the drill is over, or when everybody gets outside of the building and they meet in their convening area. Are they able to get in their car? Do they know who they're going to get home with? Do your van pool people know where to meet and what to do? Even if they're not training at that level, even if it comes from the company to communicate with as fellow employees, what their plan would be, I think would be really useful. And I look forward to helping them continue to develop what those plans would be. Does the transit service that serves your local companies, do they know the number of people on each campus? This is a sensitive topic. Not all companies want you to know how many people are on their campus, just for proprietary reasons, for safety and security reasons. But in this situation, it may be to the company's advantage to get with their local transit service and make sure that the transit service knows how many people are there so that they know how much help to send. This is a conversation I've been navigating with our companies. I'm like, listen, guys, you've got to let go of the reins on this, or at least get the permission to do so if you can, so that the transit service can help you. Do your companies know who to ask for help in planning for and in an emergency situation? They don't always know. Like I said, we're in 2 different counties. I found that some of our counties thought they were in Wake County when I know they're in Durham. And the person who they should call might be different. So in an emergency situation, you want to make sure, if you're responsible for a campus like ours, that everybody knows who they're supposed to call beyond just 911. And then, are there different strategies and tactics for different levels of lead time? So hurricane with maybe 48 hours versus tornado, which is maybe 2 hours, versus we need to get out of town now because there was a plane crash or something worse. And then finally, is there regular and planned communication, coordination between companies and emergency response? Actually, I should have added on there transportation agencies. So as much as you can practice it beforehand, even if you only do it every 12 to 18 months, that way the first time you do it isn't the first time you do it. So with that, I will wrap up and look forward to reporting back on kind of future lessons learned as we continue down this path. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have spoke with you today. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa. This is great information. Before I introduce Dezra, just a quick reminder to folks that if you do have questions, please use the raise your hand icon next to your name on the menu bar there to type in your question, and we will attempt to get most of those answered at the end of the call. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dezra Nauls. Dezra is the Commuter Services Program Manager for the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County. Previously, before joining the Transit Authority, he was a customer care manager with V-Ride, area manager of student transportation with Houston ISD, and a customer service training and development manager with Metropolitan Transit Authority. And please join me now in welcoming Dezra Nauls.
Hello, everyone. Hello. And I want to, as Lisa did, I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to share this information with everyone. Again, my name is Dezra Nauls, and I am the Commuter Service Program Manager here at Metro, Houston Metro, and specifically in the area of Vanpool. The regional Vanpool program is where I work. And so I want to spend just a little bit of time talking to you guys about the experience that we had with a little rainstorm that came through and dropped a little bit of water on town. It's you may have heard of it. It's called Hurricane Harvey. And so just talk about some of the lessons that we learned from the storm and some of the experiences that we had as it relates to the storm. Let's see here. I can't get this thing to move, so. So just a little bit about our program before I get started. We currently have about 567 van pools on the road, and we have about 5,600 plus riders. And the van pool program is situated with you have the bus service, of course, and then you have the Metro Rail, and then you have the Metro Lift, which is the paratransit arm of Metro, and then you have the regional van pool program. What's different about us is unlike the bus service, which is restricted by a geographical area called a service area that they're restricted into going into, the van pool program is the regional program for our area. So we are able to go into an 8-county area that you see at the bottom there. So you have Harris, Montgomery, Liberty, Chambers County. And so some of these counties all put together are, can be larger than some states in the United States are, so that's a lot of space, that's a lot of people that we are responsible for reaching out to as it relates to the van pool program. So just what you're seeing now is just some images that we kind of captured from the storm, that you probably have seen on the news media. But just to give you an example of how this storm was so different from anything we've ever seen before, that top picture is some construction that was going on Interstate 45 North. And Interstate 45 North, for those of you who are not familiar with Texas and Houston, is the main thoroughfare that goes between Houston and Dallas, Texas. And so that's a pretty main freeway. There's tons of traffic on it. And they were doing some construction on it when Harvey came through. So the left is, of course, a picture on right before the storm. And on the right is a picture that resulted after the storm had come through, the rain has fell, and the flooding became a problem. And then you see some other pictures that were captured throughout the city, some different areas where it was just unbelievable the amount of water that fell on the city and the amount of tragedy and disaster that resulted in this storm coming our way. Just a little bit about how we were affected. Our region, 40,000 plus homes were inundated by water and or destroyed by water. 500,000 vehicles were destroyed as a result of the storm. Now, right there, you have to really put that into context, because if you have 500,000 vehicles destroyed, you have to think about, that doesn't include our vehicle provider, which just happens to be also a rental car agency. So, they have a number of vehicles, worth millions of dollars that were also destroyed. So we're looking to them to help, and then they're also in a bad situation also with several of their vehicles. Several 100,000 of their vehicles have also been destroyed. Just a fun fact, if you will, 127 billion gallons of water fell on our region, and that is enough water. We were in Louisiana last year for the ACT conference. So those of you who were there, you saw the Superdome and how large the Superdome is. That was enough water. 127 billion gallons of water is enough water to fill the Louisiana Superdome 26,000 times. So that's an enormous amount of water that fell on our city. And then about our program, we had 23 van pool vehicles which were completely destroyed by this flooding event that had to be replaced. And I'd like to think that there would have been more had we not done the outreach that we did prior to the storm, and some of the things that I'll talk about a little later in the presentation that kind of helped us. The picture that you're seeing to the right of that is the neighborhood that I lived in 6 months prior to the storm. That I had sold my home in that neighborhood, and 6 months later when Harvey hit, you can see what I would have been faced with had I still been living in that neighborhood. So that just, it really drives it home, like, wow, places that have never flooded before got water this time. And it's just unbelievable how many of those people are still not in their homes and are still trying to recover as a result of the storm. You wouldn't believe the number of people who are still suffering. And now here we are. It's hurricane season again, and we're all, on the edge of our seats. We don't know if we're going to be hit by something like a Harvey again. You just simply don't know. We did quite a bit of outreach to our groups prior to the storm. As Lisa said, with a hurricane, you've got a little bit more time to kind of prepare in some cases. With Harvey, we were kind of getting mixed messages about how the storm was going to hit us, if the storm was going to hit us, which direction it was going to go, where was it going to make landfall. And as it started to get closer, the message got more dire for our area. They were starting to predict that the storm was going to hit Houston and that it was going to, if you will, it was going to stall over our area, which is the really bad thing, because the water is going to fall, and eventually the water has nowhere to go, and it has to come inside. And it was going to be a bad flooding event. So we started to get those messages. And so we started immediately to communicate with all of our groups, letting them know, hey, our emergency operations plan is now in effect. We want you to be safe. We want you to avoid low-lying areas. We want you to avoid traveling in those areas. We kind of have a saying that we use around our region, turn around, don't drown. If the water looks too high, turn around, don't try and go through it. So we start sending out those messages. And we always, as a part of our outreach to any group, we make sure that our groups understand that the van pool vehicle is an important asset. So they understand to view the van pool vehicle as if it was your personal vehicle. And we impress that point to our van poolers every opportunity we get. So they understand when we reach out to them and say, hey, it's time to put the vehicle, move it to higher ground, make sure that it is out of harm's way. Our groups understand, okay, yes, we know the plan, we know to move it to higher ground. So some of the vehicles that you see here on the right were some of the vehicles, unfortunately, that we asked the groups to move them to higher ground. They did so. They did move them to higher ground because one of the locations that they park at usually always floods. And so we asked them, please move it to higher ground. So they actually moved it to much higher ground. It's a Target parking lot that's kind of adjacent to where they normally park. And the Target location is built very high up, kind of intentionally. They built it high up because it's not far from the San Jacinto River, which is a very large river that goes through our county. So they moved it to a very high area that you would never suspect that this location would ever flood because of how high it is. Unfortunately, the water got so high that these vehicles were completely submerged in water, as was the brand new Target that was just built. So that Target was completely flooded. Water was to the roof of the Target. So that just gives you an idea of how high this water got. Now, this van in the top left-hand corner, you can see there's a tree limb on top of the van. So that gives you an idea of that water at some point was had completely covered this vehicle. And we stumbled upon these vehicles as we were out kind of assessing the damage after the storm. We found our vehicles, and we were actually able to open the doors. And when we opened the doors, you could just simply tell that these vehicles had been completely covered in water. So all of these vehicles, of course, were a part of the complete loss that we talked about a little bit earlier. Just to give you an idea of what we do as a yearly storm preparation, as hurricane season approaches on June 1st. June 1st just happens to be, my birthday, so I'm really sorry that my birthday brings in this kind of worry. But June 1st is when it starts. So as soon as June 1st approaches, we start sending out mass email reminders to our van pool drivers and riders to avoid the low-lying areas, as I stated, while driving. Turn around, don't drown. We work to identify groups at risk and contact them personally regarding storm preparation. Those groups that are in those low-lying areas, like the vans that I just showed you, we go above and beyond the email. We actually call them and say, hey, just reminding you that, it's that time that we start watching, weather and start, paying close attention to your email box and your phone calls, because we're going to be calling you if something happens. We'll need to remind you to make sure you move your vehicle to higher ground, because for sure your parking location is prone to flooding. Again, we remind our program participants that the van pool vehicle is an important asset, and we all know that once this water subsides and once the roadways are back open, that we've all got to get back to work, and so we'll need a way to commute, because the traffic is not going to go anywhere. So we're still going to have that commute issue that we've always had. So we're going to have to get back to work. So we'll need the van pool vehicle to do so. We also do something a little different than I think some other programs do. We keep track of where each vehicle resides, and we're blessed to have a parking outreach representative on our team. We have a gentleman on our team who specializes in helping our van pool groups find parking, so that they can begin van pooling. Everybody on this call that's a van pool program, I'm sure we all understand some of the stress that we face with finding parking locations for our groups, so that they can participate in our programs. And so Artis helps us to find that parking, and he also helps us by keeping close eye on where each of the vehicles resides, so that when the storm happens, we're able to track what type of risk we're exposed to as it relates to where they're parking. And this storm was a little bit different, because there were some areas that I could take you to them right now and you would say, oh, never in a million, this would never flood. But during Harvey, it did flood. So this, there's just really no way you probably could have been prepared for this. So we have an ongoing emergency operations plan, advance notice. Of course, we're monitoring weather conditions. I actually have a weather radar that's on my desk that I kind of keep up on my desk, that I watch the weather, because we're experiencing some tropical rain right now. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on what's going on with the weather at all times. So we're monitoring weather conditions and storm predictions, and we're tracking where the storm is. We're providing advance notice to our van pool groups. We stay in constant communication with the groups, and we're trying to identify those groups who could potentially be at risk of some flooding, or be at risk of losing their vehicles. We're in constant communication with our staff. So our staff understands what's going to happen in the event of a storm. Our van pool groups, of course, Metro, our transit agency operations, they have an emergency operations management center that we're in constant communication with, to find out, what do we need to be doing next? Where's the storm headed? What's being predicted? And we're also in constant communication with our vehicle provider, because we want to make sure at all times that we're on the same page with our vehicle provider, so that when this storm is over, the recovery begins. They're going to be a very key partner to us getting our program back online. We want to get those vehicles replaced, get those vehicles moved to where they can potentially be repaired, and we want to get those people back on the road and van pooling with as little interruption as we possibly can. Some of the things that we did as a result of Harvey, because it was just such an interesting storm that hit our area, we provided to kind of lessen the effect, and there were so many people that were potentially affected by this storm. What we did as a van pool program to show our commitment to our community is we offered each van pool group, they received a 1-week service credit, and that kind of coincides with many of the credits that like the power, the light company was offering, AT&T, some of the other service providers were all offering credits and things like that to people who may have experienced loss in our area. So we were in line with that same type of commitment. We offered each van pool a 1-week credit. We also provided ongoing financial customer service support to those who were affected by the storm. We have something called our emergency care program. We have people who normally you could literally be on the street and I could live across the street from you and my house could have flooded, but yours didn't. So you have people who may have been on your van pool vehicle. You live in the same neighborhood. your home didn't flood, so you're able to go right back to work when the water recedes. But I live across the street from you. My house flooded, and so now I've lost everything. So as a result, I can't live in my home. So I have to move across town with my sister, at my sister's house. And so now I can't commute with you. So we had a bunch of vans that had empty seats as a result of the storm. And so of course, those vans have immediately go into low ridership because the people that are riding those vans are no longer riding them, and we simply don't know when those people are going to come back, because we don't know the extent of the damage, or they may not be able to get back to their home. So we had to provide ongoing support to those vans, helping to identify new riders, helping those people who have been displaced with finding a new commute, now discovering here's what your new commute is. We actually had some companies that buildings have been completely destroyed as a result of it. Some of you know or have heard of Aramco, which is a large global oil and gas company. Their building was completely destroyed as a result of the storm, and they had to move their entire operation from the south side of Houston to downtown Houston. Well, that gave us that was a new opportunity for us because now they now have to get 13 Vanpool vehicles from our program that we didn't have before. We had 13 groups that because they had their own Vanpool program, but they lost their vans in the storm. So now they have to come into our program. So we have 13 vans as a result of that. And then we also had, now that presents an opportunity to transit because now that their company is centrally located downtown, a lot of the employees there could now benefit from the park and ride service that Metro offers. And so we immediately partnered with our operations, our bus operations department, and made sure that bus was connected to Aramco, made sure that they had all the information that they needed from the Aramco side, from the bus side, as well as the Vanpool opportunity that we experienced. British Petroleum, they're still suffering. They're still not in their building. So we had several vehicles that had to go away, that we had to terminate those vans as a result of the storm and them being displaced from their company. And BP, it's May, no, it's June. So BP is just now opening a portion of their campus out west of Houston because several of their buildings were completely destroyed as a result of the storm. So we have an ongoing plan. It's an aftercare plan that they're in now. We're helping those same groups that were affected by the BP now that they're starting to come back online and come back to work. We're actually reaching out to them, getting them back in their vans, getting them back to where they once were, almost a year ago now. In summary, some of the lessons that we learned as a result. Here's what Harvey really taught us. We realized that we needed to have better GIS data on our van pools, our riders, and our work sites to determine the risk levels in our 8-county area. Because again, our area is so large that we simply needed to have a better idea of what is where and how those areas are situated, how it relates to van pools, and not only where people live. We need to realize where the work sites are, and how the work sites are being affected by these types of storms. And if it's preventing people from coming to work or preventing people from going to work because my home was okay, but my work site got destroyed. So how can we help in events like that? Move vehicles to higher ground. We've actually also instituted a tow plan for vehicles. That whereas if a vehicle, we've asked someone to move a vehicle, similar to Harvey, we told people to move them to higher ground. Those vehicles that I showed you a little bit earlier, we actually attempted to get in and tow those vehicles because we saw the water rising. We tried to go in because our Office of Emergency Management has cameras. So they literally are watching the vehicles be submerged in water. And so they reached out to us early on and said, hey, we're going to send our tow trucks in there to get them out so that we can prevent them from being flooded. Well, the water rose so fast that the tow truck driver, it was just unsafe. The state troopers wouldn't allow them to go in and get the vehicles because the water was rising so fast. And so we've now instituted a plan where if we can get to the vehicle in time and we can't find the person who maybe has the keys to get them to move it, we'll go in and tow the vehicle to prevent it from being a loss to our program. We'd rather pay a tow bill than to pay to completely replace a vehicle. Constant communication with your van pool groups or with your groups. We found that if you always communicate with people, they expect communication from you. They expect to stay in the know. If we're constantly telling them about getting ready, then if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So if they're used to receiving communication from you, then they're more likely to open up your emails, open up your messages, and read. And say, hey, if Metro is emailing me, they have something to say. I want to make sure I read their email. We want to always communicate. Lisa said communication was the key. It is. Communication and coordination is central to TDM. I could not agree with that more. Improve communication before, during, and after the storm. That's what we've committed to doing. And we've also committed to talking with our van provider about their plans and that they have in place for recovery so that they can help us immediately get our program back online when the water starts to recede and when it's safe to do so. Also, one of the kind of funny things that we found is that we want to make sure you have a contact person for each group. Now, what we found for Harvey is we want to have a contact. We need to make sure we have information on our contact. We need information for our backup, and we need a backup for the backup because, we went down the line trying to reach people, and we couldn't reach anybody because everybody was displaced. So now we've just resolved that we're going to have a backup. We're going to have a backup, and a backup, because we've got to, reach out to as many people as we possibly can to get our message out and to make sure that everybody is safe, make sure that the vehicles are well kept, and so that we can prevent something like this try to prevent it from happening again in the future. So we're hoping that something like this doesn't ever happen again, but we're watching. And we think that we'll be more prepared than we were the last time, and we definitely feel that we have learned quite a bit from Harvey. There's my contact information. If anyone wants to reach out to me, if you have any questions or anything like that I could possibly help you with or share with you, I'm more than willing to do so. And thank you guys again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dezra. That was wonderful. And Lisa, for your presentation as well. We actually have quite a few questions for you guys. If you can hang on for us here just a little longer. I will get started here real quickly. Lisa, this question is for you. In coordinating between companies, to get their employees to non-flood roadways with, say with an organization that's 500 plus employees at the same time, how is the order of release decided? And this woman writes in parentheses, nobody wants to be the last, I'm sure. So how were you coordinating the release of folks one at a time there?
That is a great question. So we haven't coordinated release just yet. What we're working on is figuring out right now the best method of communication for that, so that companies can inform each other of if they're releasing and when. So during the previous ice and snowstorms that we had over the winter, it gave us a good opportunity to test in a non-emergency situation, how are we going to communicate with each other? So, for example, sending a mass email, well, all of us, if anyone's email box is like mine, you probably hate it because it gets so clogged, but email is instant, right? Anyone can look at their email box or get a ping on their phone, and they know immediately, okay, there's an email from Lisa. She wants to know if people are closing. And what I'll put in my email is, hey, if you're releasing early because it's going to snow at 3 o'clock, if you're releasing your people early, please reply all and say, yes, BD Technologies is releasing early. We're releasing at 2 p.m. Or, Cree is not releasing early. We're going to operate as normal. Hitting reply all, while it's annoying because you get 40 different emails, it's instantaneous and you don't have to log into something. Most people were okay with it. A few people were cranky about it, and I anticipated that, which gave us another opportunity to do a polling. So we did a quick survey one time that says, okay, if you're closing early, send us the details, yes, no, what time, and we did a poll. Then I'm only sending one message out saying, hey, everybody that took the poll in the last hour, here's the data that I've collected, but it's not instant, right? So that's another way of doing it. And then the third method that we tested was something that people actually have to log into. And even though that totally takes it out of email completely, the need to log in and the issue that then arises with company firewalls. Are people all able to access the same surveying tool? The short answer is no. We're trying to find the best way, and so really what we're doing right now is just identifying the best method, and then we'll get to, you're right, how do we stagger that release. I don't know if we'll get to that exactly. If really what this exercise is for at this point in time is to help our emergency management folks who are on every single one of those emails or polls or surveys or all of that. It helps them to keep an ear to the ground about how much support RTP is going to need in an evacuation, because if everybody's operating until 5 p.m. versus getting out early, then they know that they can direct their resources elsewhere. Whereas if they start to see that a whole lot of companies are releasing people around 2 to 3 o'clock, then they're going to send a lot of support over to help guide traffic. So that's where we are at this point in time.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. And then for Dezra here, we had a question asked, and I'm assuming this is during an emergency, but do you pay for the parking for the van pools, especially when you're putting them, say, I know you gave the example of the Target, but in other locations, especially during an event like that, are you having to pay for the parking for some of those locations?
In the event of a storm, we haven't had that to occur, but in the event of a storm, yes, we would accommodate a group, in an emergency situation, yes.
Okay.
For some of them, I would say we have like a parking garage that that Metro owns, that's normally used for transit service. We would move them into that parking garage with Metro Transit's support. So in that event, that's not something we had to pay for.
Okay. This next question, I'll leave it for both of you to kind of answer, and Lisa, if you want to go first here. What recommendations do you have for a multi-jurisdiction area? For instance, here in the D.C. area, we have people commuting to and from the city from 3 major areas within the city, Maryland and Virginia. Weather events and terrorist attacks are both major concerns, and they cripple the existing infrastructure.
Yeah. If you're able to, my advice would be, if there is already a mechanism by which those regional entities are already communicating, as much as you can loop into that and leverage what already exists, the better. I think our regions are probably very similar. I would expect that the DC area, is our region probably times 10, just because it's even bigger. It's not even just counties, it's states, and it's also even a broader reach of a geographic area that people are coming in and out of the capital. So definitely a great point. But I would find out where are those people already connecting and then tap into that. In our case, we already had, intentionally, unintentionally, we already had this kind of platform with security at RTP, and we learned that was how our companies were connecting. And then we learned that Durham and Wake County Emergency Management was already pretty much in lockstep with each other for a whole bunch of reasons, but because they're so close by, they were already collaborating with each other, and that the state was collaborating with the counties in different ways. And so once we kind of figured out how everyone was already connecting, we just drew a big red circle around all of it and invited them all to our space and just said, okay, well then how can we sort of get in on this and start to loop you into what we need as well? And my experience is that in the emergency management, law enforcement world, they love being in the know, and they won't say no to information. They may say no to effort. They may not be able to own everything that you're asking them to do, not because they don't want to, but just because of resourcefulness, or whose jurisdiction is what. But in terms of just knowledge sharing and information sharing, I found that that community was just super, super helpful and very interested.
Okay, thank you. I know we're running out of time. We've already hit the 3 o'clock hour here. I know we've got a couple questions. If we don't get to you all, please, follow up with the speakers. I'll have their contact details up on the website within 24 hours, along with the recording and handouts. We'll ask one more here, just going from the order of the list here. This one, again, is for Lisa. Of your TDM programs, are you considering other modes for evacuation, like biking and walking? Are there other bikes and trails for employers to utilize, evacuation plans?
Sure. Yeah, we have walking trails through the park, so nobody lives in RTP. in that our property is purely just corporate campuses. People live just outside the park, but they don't live currently inside the park. So certainly people could use walking, and I'd like to see us incorporate that. In terms of bikes, there's really only a handful of cyclists that bike to work, and that's mostly because we don't have a lot of bike lanes currently, and we have very high speeds. We have suburban roads, but the speed limit is 45 or 50, which really means people are going 60. And so it's not the safest. You really only have the most confident people, most experienced cyclists who are actually biking to work every day. But as I said, densification is imminent, so it's continuing to happen. We're going to be developing a more urban center, a town center in the RTP. And so with that, bike ped is going to become much more prominent, in which case we'll loop it in. But right now, I think the real focus is on vehicles.
Okay, thank you. And last one, Dezra, this one's for you, and then we'll wrap this up here. A question was asked on how is van pool daily occupancy tracked, and what are you doing to kind of track those numbers? I know you were talking about how you have them now. Some folks who it was a packed van at the very beginning, and when they had to move and go elsewhere after the hurricane, then your ridership lessened in certain areas in certain vans. And how are you going around tracking all of that?
We're basically using the monthly ridership report that's submitted. That gives us a clear indicator of who is riding the van, based on who they're reporting as riding and the number of days that they're reporting they're riding. So the ridership report is basically how we get that information. And then any group that we would have provided financial support to, we're talking to them on I would say a weekly basis, to see if that support is still needed. And also we're in contact with our employer contacts. So our employers are telling us when they're allowing people to come back to work, and our employers are sharing with us who is currently back at work.
Excellent. Okay. I want to thank you both again so much for this. We truly appreciate it. We had a lot of great questions. And again, this session has been recorded and will be posted live on the ACT website by tomorrow afternoon. Again, Dezra and Lisa, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us for the June webinar here at ACT. And we look forward to seeing you again on the next webinar in September. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.